Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and here's my host.
I am Chris Huddleston.
And today we are talking about the movie. I'm going to just go ahead and kick off the synopsis. In the year 10191, a spice called melange is the most valuable substance known in the universe, and its only source is the desert planet Arrakis, aka Dune. A royal decree awards Arrakis to Duke Leto Atreides and ousts his bitter enemies, the Harkonnens. However, when the Harkonnens violently seize back their fiefdom, it is up to Paul, Leto's son, to lead the Fremen, the natives of Arrakis, in a battle for control of the planet and its spice. Short, sweet, to the point.
Like it.
I am very familiar with this film. I've seen it several times. I have read all the books, and I have watched different iterations of Dune on the screen. So let's start with you, Chris, as somebody who has not done or seen those things, with your first impressions.
I'm the total opposite. I've never read any of the books. I had not seen this movie. There's another mini series, I think. I haven't seen that. I liked this overall. This, I had some familiarity with the story. I mean, I knew kind of the general idea of what it was about. I think visually this is great. And everything that I'm going to say here, since I haven't read the book or any of the books, all I can go by is the movie. So, as far as how this was adapted, I can't really speak to any of that or how, true it is to the source material. But I thought this was a really great looking movie. At times it was giving me a little bit of vibes of the 1980 Flash Gordon. Less campy, but that's a movie that I loved as a kid, so that's not a bad thing.
Well, and just to be clear, we are talking about the Dune of 1984, not the one that's coming out purportedly later this year.
Yes, exactly.
So this is the film from 1984 we're talking about.
But, even for 1984, I feel like this looks really good. There's not a ton of special effects. I think the art direction in this was pretty fantastic. I don't know how anything visually looks compared to how it was described in the books, and this being a David Lynch movie, so David Lynch directed this. Visually, he's a really great director, I think, and I'm a big Lynch fan. And that was one of the things that I thought was interesting with this is most of his movies narratively, are going to leave a lot of people cold because his movies are kind of like almost like dreams or nightmares or something. And so with this, the fact that he was adapting from a novel, there's definitely much more of a story structure than what you would typically experience in most of his work. But the effects are good in this. I thought the outfits of all the characters, looked cool. It's science fiction with spaceships and all that, but it doesn't look exactly like, it kind of seems like newer movies now that are science fiction. They basically want to make everything look like Star Wars, which I didn't feel like they did with this. The performances are very good in this. You have a lot of good actors. Kyle Maclachlan, I don't know if this was his first movie or one of his very first. He's good in it. Once again, he has great hair, just like in The Hidden. I felt at times like his hair was almost its own character because he just has so much of it and it just kind of flows around and everything. You have Patrick Stewart in... he's very different than the Patrick Stewart than we're used to. Mm-hmm. He's this general, I guess, kind of no-nonsense, hardline general, I think. Sting is in this, and I was thinking... it's a shame that Sting didn't do more movies because I think he's a pretty natural actor.
Camera loves him.
Oh, yeah, yeah. he has a kind of a limited role, but he's really great. And the Baron, now that guy's doing a very over the top act, and I don't know, you can speak to that. I don't know how that plays out in the book, but so there's a lot of there's a lot of good acting in this. So this movie gets panned a lot, and I'll get into this later, the problems that I had with it, but I enjoyed this overall. I thought it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So I'm very biased, and I'm not blind to the criticisms of it. But you're absolutely right. It's a David Lynch film, so it's all very deliberate and it's very stylized. And the performances are stylized as well. And all of that those are choices, right? That's not accident. You can't say, oh, why is the the fat guy with the bubbles all over his face, why is he screaming everything, right? He's a madman, and the costume design of looking very sort of early 19th century with the epaulets and the military uniforms. They say, first of all, one of the things that I really love about this property and of the films we've been watching recently is this one is not set in 2019, 2020, or 2021. It's set in 10,191. So they've gone so far out into the future that, you say, well, what would a military uniform look like then? And their costume designer was like, oh, I really want to go with this kind of formal, hierarchical, pomp and circumstance look, and I think it works. I have read criticism of it that's like, why are they dressed like this in space? And I think you're missing. You just have to kind of go with it at a certain level, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'll say about this property that is going to be interesting in this next one is that it's a little bit, I say this, I feel like I say this in every single podcast, but it's a little bit like adapting The Lord of the Rings. There's so much material that just getting everyone's name straight and who does what. For example, Duncan Idaho is a principal character in the book and a badass and a character you love when is on screen. And in the movie, there's maybe 2 or 3 scenes with Duncan Idaho. It's just there's no time to develop his plot lines, really, because you have to follow this Messiah character from his inception through to the completion of his arc. If you're not familiar with the material, I get it. A lot of it's like, wait, what? House who? Duke which? Why? And they spell it out. The movie opens with a monologue of the Emperor's daughter who talks for, it's got to be 5 minutes.
Yeah.
She's just like, okay, the year is 10,191. Mm-hmm. Everything's different now. Here's how it works. Here's who's who. And it's a lot, It's like a big scroll of dialogue up the page in the beginning of a film, except you have an actor speaking it. I will say that rewatching it again was really interesting because I think he does do a fairly patient job of reiterating. Characters will stop and you'll hear in sort of voiceover something key they said previously. He really tries to not let important threads escape the attention of the casual viewer. But it is very dense material. When you look at the different visual elements of it too, the design of the sandworms really comes from the artist who designed the cover for the original novel, but it's quite original and gorgeous. The effect of those sandworms sort of opening up their giant maw and seeing the rows of teeth. And it's of a different piece than say the folding space effects or the design of the spaceships from this or that planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's of a different piece than the costume design. But I don't know. I really enjoyed rewatching it. It's got a special place in my heart, and I'm very excited to see. I was just looking over the casting of the new one that's slated to come out later this year. Although with COVID, who knows what the schedules are going to be. The casting looks spot on for the new one.
Yeah, I think the new one's going to be fantastic. Let me ask you this: did you read the book first, or did you see the movie first?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I think I read the book first.
But you were
Because
like, was this when we were kids that you read it?
well,
Or
the
saw
movie the movie came out in '84, and I was an avid reader of horror and science fiction. And I just imagine that, like in the summertime, I would just burn through books,
Mhm.
and to the point where I was always looking for what to line up a book after the one that I finished. And so now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm sure that I read the books first, because I wouldn't in 1984 have gone to see Dune in the
Right.
theater. I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have that kind of agency.
Sure.
I wasn't driving yet, so who was going to take me to the theater? My parents aren't interested in this material, so I'm sure I didn't see it until it was available, like on VHS or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I remember being necessarily even aware of this at the time. I don't remember
Can you
seeing
imagine
trailers
seeing
and
this
thinking,
movie in 1984, though? I mean, this is a contemporary of The Wraith.
yeah,
Really? I mean, that was what, 86?
yeah,
And admittedly, they're very different genre movies, but, and I'm not comparing this to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but highbrow science fiction was a fairly rare thing
for sure.
early on. And this takes itself very seriously. And I think
Oh,
some
for sure.
people fault it for that, but it's one of the things about which I like it.
Yeah, another thing that I thought was very interesting about this, and I did not know this going in, and I'm gonna guess that this is probably a controversial aspect of the movie. One thing when people talk about movies, books being adapted into films, is the problem of, with a novel, you can know all the characters' thoughts, and that's tough to do with a movie. And I thought it was very interesting that he was just basically like, and you touched on it, but where everybody's just going to have an inner monologue, so all through the movie you're hearing everybody's thoughts, which I'm sure there are people that don't like that, but I think that kind of helped from the standpoint of somebody who didn't know the source material. There was a lot of times that I was lost to a degree with this, but that inner monologue helped some, and I thought that was kind of a cool stylistic touch. I'm sure they won't do that in the new one, I wouldn't think, unless that's a major aspect of the books. I don't know.
I need to go back and reread the books, actually, because they are considered, some have called Dune the greatest science fiction of all time, which
Yeah.
is pretty lofty praise. The books are spectacular. There are too many of them. I don't remember if there are 6 or 9. But books 1, 2, and 3 arc this sort of trilogy of Paul Atreides, Paul Muad'Dib.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are, for any enthusiast of the genre, those are must read, mandatory reads. If you wish to stop there, like I got hooked into it, so I went ahead and read all the books, and I think they decrease and they get more diffuse. To zoom in, this is really this is a Messiah story. We've seen it frequently, but Paul Atreides is the daughter of a his mother is, in the movie, they're referred to as witches, but they are people who there's okay. So we're going to zoom out even further. Space travel in this time is possible because of this material, aka spice, aka melange, which is only comes from a single planet in the entire universe, and it's this planet Dune, or Arrakis is the name of the planet. It's a desert planet. Spoiler alerts, so if you don't want to learn about this stuff, turn it off. It's a desert planet, and there is a native population that nobody really keeps track of, and then there's sort of an imperial, appointee who is this kind of steward of the planet in charge of mining the spice and making sure that it gets to the Spice Guild, which is yet another universal organization, so that space travel is possible. And space travel is not faster than light speed. It's about folding space. And apparently imbibing this spice in various forms expands the mind to the point that these guild members are capable of, moving spaceships from one area in space to another without the spaceship having to physically travel. So it's important to we don't get too into the the universe of 10,191's economy, but you do get the sense that this form of space travel, being really the only form of long distance space travel, is pretty key, and the members of the Spice Guild are very powerful because of that. So it turns out the Emperor is afraid that this other Duke might beat him out in an upcoming election, and so he puts into play a machination to get this guy out of the way, and this guy is Duke Atreides, and they've got their own planet. It's a water planet, oceanic planet. Currently, the Imperial Steward of Arrakis is Baron Harkonnen, and they come from their own planet. That is, and they're brutal. He is a psychopath, and he has a extended family, cruel and sadistic psychopath, and the whole planet. I'm always fascinated by this in sci-fi. It's like, this planet is this way, and that planet is that way.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that. It's very,
not the northern hemisphere, not the capital city. No, the whole planet is
it's a desert planet, or it's water, or it's ice, or that's a great point. I never really thought about that.
You're already thinking about it too hard. So so the plan the Emperor sets in motion, and also that the universe has an emperor. It's like, really? Okay. Well, again, we're thinking about it maybe too hard. So he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the Harkonnens out of there. The Harkonnens and the Atreides are bitter enemies, Montague and Capulet. We're gonna pull this psychopath out of there, and we're gonna give this honorable, lucrative position to the Atreides, and they're gonna move in there, and then the Harkonnens are gonna viciously retake the planet, killing their whole family and removing the Emperor's rival in this upcoming election, right? And no one's going to know it's me, and it's all going to look like just a local dispute, and I'll step in to be like, oh, no, tut, this is a mess, stop it. And but my problem will be solved, and my competitor for this upcoming election will be out of the way. So that's what kind of gets things in motion. And apparently it's too juicy a plum to resist. So even though the Atreides are smart enough to understand that this is some kind of a setup, they proceed. What we discover is that this mother of Paul's has given birth to a son despite being sworn to her order of Bene Gesserit witches to give birth to only daughters, because they have a messianic prophecy that one day a man will be born that is capable of taking this, water of life, as they call it. It's another derivative of the spice. It's killed every man that's ever tried to take it. Yeah, but one day a Messiah will come who's able to take it, and he will be capable of things that none of the witches of this order are capable. So guess what? Turns out to be Paul. And the movie and the book is his journey of becoming aware that some people are afraid that he may be the one, because the arrival of a Messiah is extremely disruptive for a power structure. And it's extremely frightening for even the adherents of the religion, right? Because it means that everything they know is going to change. So there are attempts on his life. There is a lot of doubt. He gets to Arrakis. The people, the native population of Arrakis are called the Fremen. They live in the desert. They're uncounted. It turns out there are legions of them living all over in the deep desert. And he in the escape of the Harkonnen attack, he falls in with them and learns their ways. And them being of the planet where the spice is made, they're the sort of natural heirs to this religious order that has been sort of scattered throughout the galaxy and uses the spice but isn't native to the planet itself. So he becomes the leader of them. He takes the water of life. He ascends. It like opens his mind, and he gains these kind of bonkers powers. And I mean, I guess I've been talking for a long time, but that's the arc, the hero's arc of the movie. It's not all that different from Neo.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Or Jesus Christ, for that matter.
Sure.
Without the giant worms and the blue drinks.
There are fewer giant worms in the Bible, but yeah.
But what it turns out, the sort of what the big reveal in the book is that the spice isn't just part of the planet. The spice is the worm itself. It's the excrement of the worm. It is the decaying worm. So when a worm dies, its body decomposes into this spice. As the worms travel through the planet, like worms do, dirt and sand goes in one end and excrement comes out the other end. That's spice. So just being on the planet, the only life form really on the planet are the Fremen and that at least that we see are the Fremen and the worms. So there's a lot of symbolism with man versus worm. The worm is the spice. The spice opens the mind. It allows for travel. It's just, there's a lot going on symbolically. All of which is just to say, I think that David Lynch taps into that, and the images we get and the shots we get and the performances we get in the movie rise to that, the broadness, the broad strokes of that symbolism. All of which, to me, makes it more effective. But it is a lot. There's another order of people that take some version of the spice. It stains. They're called Mentats. Every duke has at least one as a kind of an advisor. They're human, but they take this, they drink this derivative of the spice that stains their lips red and makes their eyebrows grow crazy, and that makes them mentally computers. Like it enhances that aspect of their logical reasoning, and so they're these sort of, and we see that the Harkonnens have one, and that the Atreides have one, and I don't even know where I was going with that anymore. I've been talking for so long. You say something.
Sure. Sure. So here's where I think where it doesn't work. A lot of what you said in there, somebody who hasn't read the books isn't going to pick up on a whole bunch of that.
It's a lot.
And I think, ultimately, movies have to stand on their own. And I think if you look at something like the Lord of the Rings movies, those are pretty dense novels with a lot of characters and weird names and all of that. But, people who haven't read the books can watch those movies and you're not like, I don't understand what's happening. Who's this person and why are they fighting? And, why, and it is all this. And I'm sure with the source material, that's difficult to do, and we'll see what's going to happen with this new film. But I think if you look at and I'm sure there are people that would say this is blasphemy to compare these. But if you look at Star Wars, and Star Wars is more of a popcorn kind of a thing. But I think compared to even a lot of movies that are made now, what George Lucas and the other people involved with Star Wars did a great job with is you're just kind of dropped in there, but all the characters, you almost instantly understand who they are. Han Solo's he's a space pirate. Luke is not a lot different necessarily than the character of Paul. He's, eventually he becomes the one. You've got a princess, you've got a good wizard and an evil wizard. So, I think for a movie, unless it's a mystery or something, which this is not, I imagine part of why this kind of bombed at the box office is just people who hadn't read the books, I'm sure, were confused, and I think ultimately that's what a screenwriter has to do, is adapt the book, make it a movie.
Okay, so we've been having some network issues, but we're gonna pick right up. You made an excellent point, I thought, about George Lucas and his characters in the film being instantly recognizable as for what they were. And my only comment on that would be, like, I agree 100%. The Star Wars was not a 3-volume science fiction epic first. Novel. It was created as a film. So I think it has an advantage in that regard. The characters in Star Wars are also not, like, if you go and read the book, they're also not nearly as deep as the characters. It is, it's a novel about human relationships set in space, and the stakes are a messiah. So that makes adapting it for the screen tough, because the goal is something closer to Star Wars, where people can buy a bunch of popcorn and really enjoy it. But the source material has got many, many, many Escher-esque intricacies and interrelationships, all of which drive the journey of the hero. So I would say, even with The Lord of the Rings, which was a big trilogy, rich with lore and interpersonal relationships, it was so foundational in terms of shaping fantasy as a genre since then till now. Dungeons and Dragons being the single biggest offshoot of Tolkien's imaginings.
Yeah.
That I think when you start watching it, I have 2 points I want to make. I think when you start watching it, first of all, you know what a wizard and a dwarf and an elf are, right? Those are cemented in the popular imagination because of Tolkien's original books. So the movies have a big head start in that regard on their own. I also think that Peter Jackson did a really masterful job of weaving exposition into the dialogue. So instead of Paul Atreides pausing and looking stricken while you hear Paul Atreides' voice and voiceover being like, she thinks that I'm the one, right?
Yeah.
You have Gandalf saying, like, these are the lost seeing stones, not all of them are recovered. We're not sure who's watching. Now he's telling that to another wizard who knows that, right? Why are you telling Saruman that? Saruman understands this, but the audience doesn't. And if you stop and think about it in an obnoxious way, the way I have, or if the movie does it in such a way that it takes you out of the movie and you're like, wait, why is he telling the other guy who already knows this? Then that's a failure of filmmaking. But it is necessary to bring the audience up to speed on several of those points. And I think the Lord of the Rings film adaptations do a pretty masterful job of taking what isn't actually dialogue in the books and converting it to dialogue so that the audience can say, wait, why is he doing that? Oh, because he just told me why he's doing that.
Yeah.
Now, that's a thesis right there, to compare Dune and Lord of the Rings, the books, and see the challenges of adapting one or the other to the screen. But, David Lynch made I think a big choice, and he committed to it. And I do think that this is a film. I've seen it several times. I do think that this is one of those films that to really get it all, you probably need to see it more than once. And this was not particularly critically acclaimed, but while those are sometimes critically acclaimed, those don't tend to be audience favorites.
Yeah, for sure. I think with I mean, this is 100% pure speculation, but I'm just going on what I think this is a pretty good guess based on what we've seen before. I think with the new movie, I think the screenplay will be much better. I don't think you're going to have where you're going to need a scorecard to understand everything that's going on. And I think another thing that hurts this 84 adaptation, and again, I can't speak to what the books are like, but there's not a whole lot of action. It's pretty dry. There's some action at times, and I imagine the Denis Villeneuve, or however you say his name, I think this will be quite a bit like Blade Runner 2049 in that it's still a cerebral, that's a cerebral movie,
Yeah.
but it has enough action in it that it's not just like, it's not 2001 or something, which 2001 is one of my all-time favorite movies, but I could see how a lot of people would not enjoy that because there's not a lot of, so I think, there's definitely going to be more action in this new one. And I think you're going to just have a much tighter script. So things are more accessible for hardcore fans of the books. Are you with me? Hello?
The internet is conspiring against us, but we're going to admit defeat at this point. We're going to wrap it up. I would say well worth a watch, certainly worth pairing with the new version of Dune coming out, which I'm excited to see. What would your advice be, Chris?
So I would recommend this to science fiction fans. I think this movie gets a bad rap. It's, it's a little slow especially by today's standards, but even just I really enjoyed it from a visual standpoint. Again, a lot of the times I was kind of confused, but I could get the gist of what was going on. But I think there are some cool, some definitely some great visuals here. So overall, I liked it.
All right. I liked it too. That's 2 likes. So go check it out.
Hello.